Hi, I'm Kristen Brown. I'm the Vice Chair of the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education, and I'm here to provide a parent-to-parent guide on the individual education plan. If you have a child who does not have an IEP and is on a 504, it still helps to hear this information. And if you suspect a child may need special education supports, you're also going to find this helpful. Staff and teachers, I urge you to listen. Your experience is different than that of a parent, and it may help to be in the parents' shoes and know this perspective when working with families. The Community Advisory Committee handbook that the Northwest SELPA Parent Handbook is based on had a front page story that has gone missing. I want to share it with you because it was about a person planning their springtime trip to Paris. It touched on the fantasy of planning a trip, packing those lighter clothes, images of open markets and spring blooms, the expectations and the dreams of what was to come before embarking. It's not unlike what a parent imagines for their child, even when the child is in the womb. Back to our story, our traveler is on a plane that ends up landing in Siberia during a particular cold snap. They lack an understanding of the language, are not prepared with correct attire, and have found themselves sadly mourning the beautiful journey they planned that will not be in their future. Such is a very similar experience to a parent first learning their child has a disability or learning that they have a disability that impedes their access to education in an initial IEP or doctor's appointment. Back to our story, one imagines it takes a while to navigate, to arrange a place to stay, arrange for warmer clothing, and discover that there are wonders in Siberia they would never have known otherwise. Unlike our traveler, every parent who has a child needing an IEP in their education is not alone. There will be wonders to discover, and there's a new language and culture to learn to best advocate for new needs you did not expect. And hopefully that is why you're here today. I'm going to assume most of you have gone through this referral process and really skim over it, though I will be quickly reviewing Child Find and IDA. In a nutshell, this is the outline of the IEP process. You may have gotten to an initial individual education plan as part of your child's transition from preschool as a client of San Andreas Regional Center, or a referral from a student support or success team. Or maybe you boldly wrote that letter to the district requesting an evaluation, and the assessment led to finding that your child did in fact need those special education services. Unless the district responds that the student, there are times when the district responds that the student does not qualify for evaluation. Otherwise, it will lead to an assessment, and in the last two cases of referral, there would be a determination of eligibility. I'm going to note that if you get a does not qualify letter, please do not be discouraged. These are not documents in stone. My child was in a student success team, and my first request for special education assessment was met with a does not qualify or DNQ letter. I took that letter, took it to heart, and read why they were refusing an assessment for my child. I knew in my gut that this was not the right decision, but I also looked at what I'd sent to them and realized I didn't really make my argument clear. Take that time, use that opportunity. If your gut is still telling you that this child should be assessed and does need assistance that you think is best from special education services, then take the time to make that happen. Do not take a does not qualify letter as a final word. Your child is changing. There might be new signs. You could have a better argument. There are 13 categories of disability under which a team can conclude relates to your child that best describes the challenges, that determines the supports that they will need, and best serve your child towards success. They are specific learning disability. Examples of this are dyslexia and nonverbal learning disability. I also want to note that specific learning disability is the most common disability that students are receiving special education services for. It makes up about 34% of the special education population. The other disabilities are other health impairment, and this is any impairment that limits a student's strength, energy, or alertness. Think ADHD or inattentive ADD. The other disabilities are autism, emotional disturbance, which is a dreadful phrase for any mental health issues that impede a student's ability to access their education, including anxiety and depression. Speech or language impairment, visual impairment, deafness, hearing impairment, deafblindness, orthopedic impairment, intellectual disability, an example of that is Down syndrome, or traumatic brain injury. Those support needs will determine what placement or educational setting your child will thrive in. General education, special day class, categorical special day class, non-public school or county program. Notice that each of these are getting more restrictive, and I will circle back to this. The plan will also include goals and direct instruction that will help your child achieve those goals. There will be an annual review on the third year, the triennial. At this meeting, there will be an updated psychoeducational evaluation to further inform the team of progress or new information on developmental issues. There are times when the evaluation may not be in the 3-year cycle. For instance, when special education services are no longer required and the team is looking at changing the status of the student to a 504, they must perform a psychoeducational evaluation before that exit. Or when there are dramatic changes, an evaluation is requested is another opportunity. I will add that every parent should know that as their child graduates from high school, it's time to have that 504. An IEP does not follow a child to education outside of the public education years, but a 504 will. Without a 504, colleges are not required to support a person's disability, nor are teachers required in any accommodations. That said, more and more colleges are accepting an IEP in place of a 504, but legislature and federal guidelines are not enforcing this. So please consider that transition to 504 before you graduate. I'm going to begin at the beginning, and that is child find. I'll talk about these topics about child find versus the student support team, your initial IEP, and the triennial. I'm really surprised at how little seems to be understood about child find. It's not finding a missing child. It's identifying a student that may need those special education supports. What's surprising to me is that it's written in a mandate very similar to that on child abuse, in that the threshold is simply suspicion. If a parent suspects, if a doctor suspects, if a teacher suspects, they are to request an assessment for that child. The National Office of Education and the California Department of Education have urged schools to use a student success or support team as part of a multi-tiered system of supports, or in San Jose Unified as part of their positive behavior intervention and supports. In IDEA, there's something similar called Response to Intervention, or RTI. The difference between a student support or student success team and RTI is that RTI is a model for identifying and addressing the specific academic needs of struggling students, and a student success team or student support team has a much broader scope. It is not scientifically based. Though it could be, they could use those materials. So if you're in a student support team or student success team, push for it to be more and more data-driven and best assimilate a response to intervention model. If your child has a current student success or student support team and you believe they need special education support at any time, you may request an evaluation, and the student support team or student success team will continue until that initial IEP determines that that child does in fact, or maybe they don't, but if they do need those special education supports. Regardless of how your child is doing, this is how every parent should be participating in their child's education. Success of a student is closely tied to parent involvement, including communication with their teacher and the child to be clear on how they can participate in their child's education. If you're not reading this curve very well, don't worry, it gets larger in the next slide. Before I discuss this curve in the slide that you can read, I want to say IEP trainings have two very explicit takeaways. Always, always, capital always. Record your meeting and capital document everything. As a parent, please record everything. There are apps for your smartphone or digital recorders are very expensive. You'll find those at your drugstore or Target. What is nice about using an app is though the app may be free with an inexpensive upgrade, you could get voice to text software and then you have a written record of what was discussed on hand. Some of the voice to text even offer translation. If you're not an English speaker, they're worth your time. Take to look at the different options and test them out. Documenting everything means just that. All too often, I found myself saying, but we agreed, and having nothing but the memory of that agreement to back me. If you have a talk with any staff about your child's special education supports, commemorate it in a follow-up email. Then you have a conversation documented. The psychoeducational evaluation will list a lot of scores. You should get this report at the initial IEP and each triennial. Hopefully you have a draft in advance of the meeting, and if you do, I urge you to plot the scores. A typical child with no learning challenges, you'd expect all their points to fall in that average range. Children getting an initial evaluation are not always in that average range. My sons were both atypical with autism, and their curves would have marks in very superior to low average. They had good grades, and I share this because there's a myth that a student with good grades or achievement does not need special education supports. I'm hoping as I said that myth, you rolled your eyes. You can easily find a template of this curve by putting IEP bell curve in your search engine. IEP teams have been kind to occasionally supply one with the report, but I've not seen that consistently yet, and I always like to keep my own record. Please don't let the thick packet of paper or the numbers drag you down. All of that is to address a concern and tease out the why so that the team can discuss how to gain progress in your child's education. They quantify a small part of who your child is, and they do not define them. The team has their specialties and are counting on you to keep the planning on the one part you know best, your child. That is why it is important that you question, agree, disagree, and not keep conversation about your child's needs limited to these IEP meetings. I also wanted to share this diagram. I know I talked earlier about the student, parent, teacher triangle. Someone added this point way up there, the potential. I'm going to suggest to you that you consider that IQ number that's given to you in your psychoeducational evaluation as that marker of potential. This is where you want your child to get. If you have points in that report falling to the left of that potential, you know there's more supports needed to get your child there. Use it as your North Star. Consider the relationship between that point and your child's scores, and the information and that report should explain any disparities between scores and that potential. I'm not saying disparity is a negative thing. It may be your IQ point is below a score, and the report explains processing that prevents your child from showing more success in that area. I told you I'd circle back to this. Each IEP ends with placement for your child. IDEA states that the placement needs to be the least restrictive. You see in this diagram that the red dots are students in the special education and the green dots are children in general education. So the bottom of the graph, an inclusive setting in general education, shows everyone in the one space. You see from there that the students in special education, as you move up the pyramid, get more and more isolated or siloed. Self-contained is our special education classes, and private special education school includes non-public schools. The goal for each setting is to help your child move down the pyramid if their disability will allow it. For some children, you may see they get more siloed as their peers mature. This is a common practice of schools, but less inclusive. The Santa Clara County Board of Education held a task force on special education and concluded that all students benefit from more inclusive programs. Please keep that in mind if you see the trend for your child, this trend for your child, sorry, and challenge the team to be creative and more inclusive. I want to go back to the general education inclusion circle where you see the red and green dots are all in one space. I point to this because I have heard often in secondary schools, which are middle and high school, PE is the one class special day class students get to have inclusively with other students. Sometimes it's their only class, sometimes it's one of a few. But I've heard some sad stories about coaches who just are not secure in having those students in their class and isolate those students away from other students in the class. If your PE class is to be inclusive and you hear this is a practice in your classroom, please have a serious conversation with that teacher and with that principal. Thank you. There are a couple sections in IDEA where the parent pops in, section 1401 and 1414. In 1401, parent means biological or adoptive parent of a child, a foster parent, a guardian, an individual acting in the place of biological or adoptive parent, or a surrogate parent. In section 1414, the term individualized education team, program team, means a group of individuals composed of the first one they list, the parents of the child with a disability. The sixth one they list is at the discretion of the parent or the agency, other individuals who have knowledge or special expertise regarding the child, including related services, personnel as appropriate. Please hear this. I have been to IEP meetings where parents have brought in the manager from San Andreas Regional Center, or brought in someone from the boys and girls group that their child is active in to be part of that meeting. Here's someone who knows your child and is aware of their disability and knows them well and may have amazing input for that IEP team to hear and can add to the story about the individual you are all discussing. So I encourage you to not think that when you're going to an IEP, you must go alone. Think about the people in your child's life that could really change or help in your IEP and consider inviting them in. Rarely have I seen people say no. So do it. Sorry, under me there it says child, in case you don't quite catch it there. I forget that the little squares there. IDA lists a parent as any legal guardian with the additional exception of a surrogate guardian. Sue Pavlik and I are certified as surrogates to be called on by the SELPA for student that may have no legal guardian able to participate in an IEP. Most parents and guardians know the individual and may have information on limitations the child has that tests will not reveal. Your participation, parents, guardians, surrogates, it's necessary. Share with the IEP team your concerns with an email to your case manager as soon as you get a notice of meeting, if you haven't yet. Include with that any changes you are celebrating. My son was packing his own lunch in middle school. By high school, he was tying his shoes. Doesn't matter that his peers mastered these years before. This is a meeting about your child and their achievements, concerns to be addressed, and goals. And if you share their achievements, it's a great way to let the team know more about how your child is developing. I took, so this acronym for CARE, I took this from the SELPA handbook. This spells out why parents are important. The communication helps reach a better understanding and transference of home to school. For instance, if a child is great at keeping it together at school, but at home, they explode, and some of us have had that experience, there may be triggers at school. And with the IEP team, the family can now figure out what those are and help after school home life be easier. Many students struggle to make it to school or stay in class once at school. It's important that you too are tracking these with the diary and comparing notes with the team. Information like the soccer player, those insights can assist in getting support your child needs and review. You know the child's history the best, and you bring that to the table with you. An IEP is more productive if you're preparing. When you're asking for an IEP meeting between an annual, you might not have a week to prepare, but you should squeeze in as much preparation as you can. This list is certainly something to plan with before any IEP. Fact gathering will include grades, examples of your child's work, listing examples of your child when not in school, and any independent documentation such as outside assessments. It is always important to talk to your child. Ask them, how's it going? How are you feeling about being pulled out? Are push-in services helping you? You never know what will come up. It may be you're having a meeting because your child's refusing OT, and in the discussion, you find out the OT teacher had bad breath. Now you have something to formulate a solution, and the OT teacher knows that onion sandwiches might not be the best idea. Anyone consider once your child is mature enough, including them in the meeting. Then pre-think with them. Please pre-think. It's important they know the focus in this meeting is not only the great things they do, but we'll be focusing on the things that are proving hard for them. Why that is, and how as a team we're going to formulate pathways that will help them. Discuss how it's not easy to hear these things about yourself so that they're ready. Give them coping mechanisms and talk to your child before about giving them an out. Consider that secret signal to be allowed to leave or do a distracting activity, any of that. Be sure to go into the meeting with a note to yourself on what your goals are for your child and keep that always in your view. Long term should list their highest expected level of education. Short term should list some life skills you want to see or note what you're needing your child to show growth in. Think about not waiting until the meeting. If you're prepared in advance with a list of concerns and goals, share that with your case manager. They may further prepare the draft of the IEP with that assistance, and the timeline for the meeting may move quicker and get a better answer for your questions. The procedural safeguards spell out your rights and responsibilities as well as touching on the role of the parent. I want to comment on the words of the slide here saying, I know my rights. Those words may express your frustration, but many take that as a statement toward looking to file for a hearing. As a result, staff may back off more than you want them to in reaching a decision for your child's services that day. So think about veering away from that phrase. It's okay to say, I don't feel heard, and give that room a chance to repair a situation. Hopefully, you've read the procedural safeguards at least once. If English is not your language and you need your rights, the SELPA has them ready in Spanish and Vietnamese. They are to be provided to you so that you understand them. If you do not understand them, ask questions or request them in a preferred language or reading. That said, I hope you know some of these rights. Ooh. I believe you've read your rights, but I wouldn't be a good peer advocate if I didn't review them here because you need to understand them. Hear how these rights further the significance of your role in the IEP on the IEP team, and it never hurts to review them. Both fingers here. You have a right to participate in every meeting about your child's educational evaluation, including ability identification, education plan, and provision of free access to public education, which includes the services to support them. Know that prior written notice must contain a comprehensive description of the action proposed or refused by the school system. According to IDEA, or Individual Disabilities Education Act, the notice must include a description of the action proposed or refused by the school, an explanation of why the school proposed or refused the action, a description of each evaluation procedure, assessment, record, or report that the school used as a basis for their decision, a statement that the parents of the child with a disability have protection, sources for the parents to obtain assistance in the understanding of these provisions, a description of the other options that the IEP team considered and why these were rejected, and a description of other factors relevant to the school's proposal or refusal. You must receive this notice within a reasonable time, The exception being the response to the request of an initial assessment, which is 15 calendar days. The response must be in a form the general public will understand. It could be an email. And if parents' mode of communication is not a written language, the school must take steps to ensure prior written notice is translated orally or by other means to the parent in their native language or other mode of communication, such as sign language, and that the parent understands the content of the notice. District staff has reminded me that conversations captured in the IEP is considered prior written notice. I just want to briefly cover something that will show up in a prior written notice known as the Notice of Meeting, or NOM. I get asked a lot by parents who know English as a second language and desire interpretation. I'm always sad to learn no one took a beat to show them, because odds are, if they are English language learners, someone talked through a notice of meeting and skimmed the document. Please do not be that person and skim in interpretation, nor to let someone not interpret all statements in the parent response section you're about to consent to. This is where I find many English language learners may miss this opportunity. Not always is the person reviewing the document reading through all these options, and I've been to meetings with English language learning parents who were not told that they may want to mark that fifth box down, stating what language they need interpretation in. I've also had parents who do not speak English, unaware that they could send someone else in their place, and missed work and the income it provides because they did not know this was an option. So if you are a parent liaison, a friend, a staff person, or you're involved with the parents reviewing their notice of meeting, please do not skim this section. The rights and responsibilities covered in procedural safeguards are clear, that a parent must have the opportunity to understand what they are signing, and they have to sign this section. Want to clarify consent versus agreement. There may be many times you're making decisions that you're in agreement to. It's all right to agree verbally, but oral agreement is not sufficient for consent. Parental consent is always in writing. Of course, the exception is that conversation that is now in writing in the IEP notes. So if there's something that comes up in your IEP in the discussion, and you want to make sure that that is your consent beyond an agreement, say, I would like this in the notes of the IEP, and make sure that that gets entered. Consent for a change in service or assessment, and due to the need of your informed consent, interpretation must be provided by the IEP team. You have the right to refuse consent. There are two ways you can do this, either by never giving it, or, to be clear with them, to write a notice refusing that consent. You further have the right to consent to be given a non-discriminatory assessment, to receive an independent educational assessment, access educational records, stay in place, to a hearing to present a complaint relating to free access to public education, to receive mediation, to file a complaint against the school district and be informed of school discipline and alternative placement, Parents technically have final say, but if a parent proves impossible to identify or locate, that is where a surrogate comes into play. I also want to mention the link I have supplied for you here. This is to the SELPA procedural handbook. If you ever wonder about identification, referral, assessment for students, including early childhood, English language learning, you will be what will be done in special education, you're going to find your answers in that handbook. It is a very thick handbook, so do look at the outline on the cover page to find the section you want to get to. It's over 500 pages long. Very thorough. It's a good resource. Any parent who has a child enrolled in special education and possesses an IEP has the right to inspect, evaluate, and request copies of educational records. Your San Jose Unified School District Handbook talks about their policy on this on page 15. They noted that records are available during school hours to access. Give a written request to the principal, and that would be granted within 5 days from the date of the request. If I do want to note that, as you see here, that if you're divorced, a restraining order preventing access to the pupil does not prevent access to your child's records. Unfortunately, frustration may have you feeling like wanting a hearing, but it isn't cause. Any concern should go through the channels of your child's school site first. These channels are the teacher, case manager, and principal. I sometimes feel the language of what I say isn't encapsulating my concern quite right, and it is helpful sometimes to call a resource group for parents, like Parents Helping Parents, or talk to a fellow member of the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education to work on those instincts, that language, to get it honed in to a clear message that will better get the response that you were hoping for. There may be a time when you want to challenge your child is not getting the free, appropriate public education. Again, I try a group like Parents Helping Parents to get guidance on if you have cause for a complaint and walk you through the process. For due process, this is often in response to services not being provided or timelines critical to your child's access to the supports being missed. There are many education lawyers who offer free 20-minute conversations to determine if there's a cause for due process hearing. Either way, consider what your goal is. If you feel the district can fix this matter, consider something that's not a hearing, such as alternative dispute resolution. This informal hearing that may be best for getting your child the services they need. Placement includes services set forth by the IEP, such as counseling. Parent must invoke stay put rights within 15 days of being told that there is a placement change. This begins when notice is sent, not when you receive it. School must respect stay put until the issue is resolved. There is an exception the district has. School sites may move your child for up to 45 days if keeping them in their current placement results in injury to self or to others. You may want to seek voluntary and impartial mediation to help find a mutually agreed upon solution regarding your child's special education, IEP. This would be something like ADR, as mentioned before, with due process. If you're looking for mediation only, the attorneys and other independent contractors who provide legal advocacy service shall not attend or otherwise participate. Mediators assigned by Office of Administrative Hearings will attend. The mediators are also experienced in the area of special education law and mediation. This is not used to deny or delay a parent's right to a due process hearing. If your due process hearing has been requested and you're asking for mediation, it will require a joint request by both parties. It needs to be filed at least 10 business days before the date requested for due process. No, for mediation. Sorry. Final date to file the request is the date of the pre-hearing conference. Statements are due in your due process case. Canceling without good cause may result in denial of a request to reschedule. If you're getting information on disciplinary actions, I'm sorry. As a parent, I've been there and I will gladly be your non-judgmental ally. I want you to know the actions of our children are rarely a reflection of our parenting, but a behavioral matter based in the student's needs not being met. It is not unusual for a child with a disability to not be in control due to language, social barriers related to their disability, or mental health. As a result, there may be a time when their actions put others at risk or harm, either emotionally or physically, and staff are forced to respond with consequences, including disciplinary measures. For students with disabilities, there are specific rules regarding suspension or expulsion. If they're expulsed or suspended for 10 consecutive days, there should be a manifestation determination meeting held in which they will assess how the disability is contributing to the child's misconduct, or if it isn't. The result may be a change in placement, and a recall placement is not just a location. By state legislation, you should be notified anytime your child is secluded or restrained. My experience is prior to recent changes in Ed Code that older staff may waive off documenting a seclusion or restraint to not be on permanent record. Again, you should be documenting everything. If your child is frequently sent home or more recently excluded from online classes due to behavior you suspect is related to their disability, either record it with a follow-up email or daily journal. The reason why legislature is clamping down on seclusion of students is the time it takes them out of the learning environment and the impact that has. My child was consistently out of his class and by fifth grade was barely writing 2 sentences. If a site is not keeping an eye on when your child is not in class, this can be a problem. This is different than being pulled out for services because learning happens when services and class lessons are being recovered. Not so when a child is sent to the principal or to sit in another room. Back to our IEP, now that we've covered all of those. I am a fan of being organized for your child's IEP and really appreciate an organizer offered by a day in our shoes on their website. It does have a cost. There are some Pinterest, trying to enunciate that right, free forms out there too. Consider assembling a binder. I burst with pride when I attend an IEP with a parent I'm helping and I see they have one for their kid. My kids will tell you they don't have binders. I have folders. You should have a cover sheet of the IEP at a glance that notes when the next annual should be, student's case manager, and their contact information. If you can, make a list of all staff who are giving your student services and their contact details. If it's an initial IEP, bring a template asking those around the table to fill it in with a space for their name, the service they provide, email, and phone. You may have a question after the meeting and need to contact them. As a parent, have have a strong sense of the potential of your child and how you need to engage the IEP team to help you get your child there. It's okay if the potential you believe in your child is beyond what the IEP team believes. What you believe is what your child is living with. I want to emphasize the accommodations for disability. Do you know all of them or only what's in your IEP? I ask because I'm always impressed with an accommodation I didn't think of. And they're all listed on the internet. So if you haven't, do a search for your child's disability, even the comorbid ones, and keep that list with you. Highlight ones that resonate as something your child could use so you can easily spot them. If there are some that are not on the current IEP and you really like them, email those to your case manager as something you think should be in the draft of the IEP. Calendars are so hard to keep when your family life may need to center around a person's need. But there are dates and timelines you really need to keep track of. Anytime you request an IEP meeting, there are 15 days the district or school site must respond to you. If you don't get an answer, follow up. Know that with evaluations and holding IEP meetings, these are not calendar days. They are blocks of days that do not, there are, sorry, tongue twisting. There are blocks of days that do not count, such as the district's summer break or holiday breaks. If you're uncertain, ask the case manager, call Parents Helping Parents, or check a website such as A Day in Our Shoes, or put Special Education Timelines California into your search engine. Due process is one of the federal indicators. That means that the district is being watched on keeping these deadlines, those initial evaluations and IEP deadlines. The only time there was a hold on these timelines was at the beginning of the shelter-in-place orders when schools closed down for COVID. That decision came from the Office of Education, the federal Office of Education. That waiver was lifted July 1st in this state, but some evaluations that place staff in unsafe situations are still waived, and districts are to perform to the best of their ability. However, currently, assessments are not waived, just the expectation has adjusted to our current situation. Goal! Goal! Outside of assessments and preparing for a meeting, I find goals at the IEP meeting are stumbling block. I was fortunate to attend a CAC meeting 6 years ago that focused on SMART goals. That's this acronym here. Timing was perfect. I had an IEP the next day. It was a new SLP. It was her first IEP, and the goals that she'd written made 0 sense to me. So I pulled out my worksheets and sat there working with my son's SLP to retool each goal so that they were specific, measurable, attainable, and time bound. Relevant and time bound. Sorry. You're doing your IEP homework. So look, where is your child at on their goals? Have you looked at that? Are they limited only to the school, or is it something that transitions home? And if it transitions home, are you and your lifestyle able to support that? Do they still fit your child? Has your child met the goal or not? If they've met it, is it one to amp up or move on from? If they have not met it, what's keeping them from the success? Is it okay to not have all the it is okay to not have all the answers. Further, it will help the team formulate their draft of goals for the upcoming meeting. If you're wondering how the heck you would know how they're doing on their goals, I'll remind everyone that you should have an update on your child's goals each grading period. That said, they're mailed out. So grades have just come out. Do not expect them that day. Look for them in your mail in about 1 or 2 weeks. This form that spells out a SMART goals guide is available online. If you just Google SMART goals for special education, you will get this many samples of this list and the templates that you could work on and fill out yourself. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I just want you to know this because this is what staff is working with when they're formulating those goals. They've all had a lot of professional development, but that's here in this district. If you're moving around, it helps to have this to touch back to because each district has their own practices, but this really makes a comprehensive goal. And so if you're in another area looking at their goals and you're not seeing all of these points have been met in the goal, then you should have that conversation of I'm not feeling how this is attainable to my child because is this really relevant to this individual? Because it seems like, right? These are discussions that you can have in your IEP regarding their goals. If you see in your child's goals that there's not one that really applies to what your gut instinct is telling you, trust that gut and do a little searching. You're going to find that Google, if you Google IEP goals for and then fill in the blank for your child's learning disability, their social disorder, or life functions such as counting money, there are goal banks that often those goals will hit each of these markers in them. So you could check off that it's specific, it's attainable, it's relevant. They're great examples. And what's nice about looking at a goal bank is you're going to see some things that resonate as something that should be a goal for your child. And you can't ask for what you don't know. So I really urge you to include this with your homework looking at goal banks. The internet also has accommodation banks, including 504 accommodations. And while I'm on it, you should look at the list of goals and accommodations for your child's issues, as you may see a better goal than the one you have currently, or gain a sense of possibilities to help your child with accommodations you didn't even know existed. Most goals in the goal banks check each of these boxes, as I've said, and are great examples. I will add that since the IEP meeting 6 years ago, goals have been better. As I've said, there's been a lot of professional development on this. The district provides goal banks for the staff to use as well. Looking at the tip here, I will add a goal may not be quite where you want it to be. Does it include an ongoing issue or just miss it? Will that require another goal, or is there a phrase that can be added to this goal? The goals in the IEP at the meeting are in draft form. At any time, you may work with your case manager to adapt a new goal or adjust a current one with an addendum to the IEP. That may or may not require the entire team. Addendums can be done through an email, but will again involve your written consent to the change. This slide speaks for itself. Pardon my silence. Children with IEPs are entitled to a plan that facilitates a smooth transition in special education programs at 5 levels: infant to preschool, preschool to elementary to middle school to high school, and high school to the wonderful world of post-secondary education. This is an opportunity for the parent to ask for staff or teachers from the new school to participate in the meeting if you're not moving. Most staff has a sense of what is possible at the next school, but it is better to have someone from that school site who knows. There may be things to consider if your home school does not have all the supports, if a more or less restrictive setting is best, if services should be push in rather than pull out now that they're getting older. These are great times to go to a parent support meeting at Parents Helping Parents and start asking other parents of older children. They will have stories that will help of what helped, or maybe what they wish they knew. It's a great time to learn a lot from others' wisdom. Really get to know the new expectations that come with each school setting. In the high school years will be an individual transition plan. This may start when the student turns 16, but you can request it as early as 14 years old. The purpose of the formal transition plan is to prepare the student for independent living and employment. I'm sorry, not formal transition plan, individual transition plan. This is also when the IEP team identifies which graduation path the student is on, and if that will include additional years called post-secondary. It's also a chance to learn about what life planning resources the district might offer your student and how your student will have access to these resources. This is a very important time to examine the long-term plan for your child and map out how they will get from where they are to the independent life skills they need. If you have a child nearing or in high school, pay close attention to that first IEP meeting and be crystal clear on what graduation plan your child is on in the district's eyes. I say this because I've met parents who were not clear, and their belief in where their child was heading did not align with the rest of their IEP team. Many students benefit from post-secondary, where they are supported in a job setting and have access to classes offering life skills. If you think your child is getting a diploma but missed that they were not getting all the qualifying classes, your child may be getting a certificate of proficiency instead of a diploma, or not have access to post-secondary options. Be clear with what the district is planning and if your expectation is different. Do your homework. Ask questions, hold discussions, and educate yourself. You could always call on Parents Helping Parents. You can always ask your SELPA or bring your questions to the Community Advisory Committee of Special Education as well. Your child is nearing their public school completion, and it's important that you make that and blah, blah, blah. It's so important, it ties my tongue. It's important to make sure that your child is as prepared as they can be. Preparation for an IEP is every day. Keep everything documented and updated in a computer file or a binder. Any conversation that's important and reaches some agreement as to the care and services of your child needs to be made into a document. I suggest a follow-up email. This will gain you clarification too if what you remember is different from what they remember right away. At any time you are asking questions, know your goal. Is it understanding? Is it a change to the IEP? Engage staff in the in that in that with, can you help me better understand this? Or take that Lieutenant Columbo like question and show your confusion, but get your point in. For instance, I know you're telling me the child is average, but it says here that the vocabulary score is in the 16th percentile. Does that matter? Or just one more thing, I'm confused. My favorite line. So remember, who do you first take your concern to? It should be the teacher. If you're not getting what you need from the teacher, please talk to your case manager or principal. Finally, I leave you with resources. These are great resources to help you be an amazing parent advocate for your child. I love A Day in Our Shoes just because I get regular newsletters, constant updates. This is written by an advocate on the East Coast, so it's not always true to California law, but that resource is just helpful. And every now and then she has a webinar I'd love to attend. Parents Helping Parents, right in our backyard, designed and launched by parents with students with special needs, actually a group of moms who started to get network together because they all had Down syndrome's kids and couldn't get services or resources at the time. This was decades ago. This is what has grown out of it. And it's beautiful. And it's an opportunity for not only you to access their library, which has amazing books on special education and supports and information. They have workshops, they have parent support groups, they have sibling support groups. There's so much at Parents Helping Parents. If you haven't yet connected with them, please do. The Inclusion Collaborative is housed in our Santa Clara Office of Education. They are internationally known. If you ever are looking for something to be for your child that you want to be sure is inclusive, it could be you want summer camp or it could be a sport, call them. They know what is available throughout the Bay Area. If you want to learn more about inclusion itself, they have amazing workshops. They have monthly gatherings where you can attend. They're public, where they are bringing in teachers and talking about their adventures in inclusive teaching. So it's a wonderful learning opportunity. Rights law, this gets down to IDEA. You know, if you have a legal question, you could pose it to them, or you could look at Q&As that they've done in the past and see if anything will help you with the situation you're in. It's a great resource. They have wonderful books. My favorite is the From Emotions to Advocacy that you see pictured on the right side of the screen. Do know that the Northwest SELPA has provided that parent handbook I referenced at the beginning of this discussion with the story that's not in there anymore. Maybe I'll get it back in. It's under when you get to the SELPA site on the Santa Clara County Office of Education, you'll find it under parent and community resource links. Please take advantage of that. It is available in Spanish. I think it's in Vietnamese. It might be available in Vietnamese by now. I know it was requested, so we'll see. But please look at that. And on that SELPA website, you could also look at the guidelines, the procedural guidelines that they have there that they're used throughout the county in special education. And that includes a lot of templated forms. So I think I noted that on one of the slides as well. Thank you for listening to this in its entirety. I think I went over an hour in recording it after the fact because it wasn't getting recorded during the CAC meeting. Please, parents, hopefully I have helped you have a voice, be involved. Our kids are just too important. And I know it's out of your comfort zone, and you're all the more amazing for it. Okay. Thank you.